After our great victory in the war of the Second Republican Coalition, where all Republican forces were destroyed and the grandness of our kingdom restored, our Gold King left us, leaving behind one final order to his most loyal subject, William Tanner. He wanted him to disregard the Regency Council that would follow and instead reform the kingdom into a commonwealth. Not for the benefit of the royal family or any elite nobles, but for the benefit of the one thing that matters, the people. With resistance in the previously Republican lands falling significantly already, he is ready to execute the final order, to dissolve the kingdom. It will be costly both politically and economically, mostly since the elites want to keep the kingdom and further centralize it. But they won't be able to stop us, because Tanner is popular and he has the spirit of our last king behind him. Still, our popularity and influence needs to raise a lot before we can fully dissolve the kingdom. Fortunately though, we currently have enough to clear the road. With Tanner's huge influence in the army, he is opening the ranks to non-elites, because while our elite troops are doing great, with our growing borders they will never be able to fully enforce them. The opening up also includes destroying the ancestral cults of the nobles. No longer shall you become a general because your dad is a noble, but you need to be able to prove that you indeed can become a great general. At the same time, since we already have a stranglehold on the nobles, we can raise our taxes on them, which will allow us to finance the Commonwealth project. With all that, the popularity of our planned reforms are over 50%, which means we can take the first major step. While the idea with the Commonwealth is to decentralize our rule and never allow a second Stonewall battle, in order to succeed we must integrate all our subjects and duchies. This is to create a common system and disable any revolts such as the one Langenburg did 5 years ago. Fortunately, all our subjects were easily integrated, including their militaries who were restructured to fit ours. In order to keep up the growth of our popularity, we must begin to deliver on our promises that we are doing this for the people. The easiest way is to distribute the state's power to them through various reforms, basically democratizing our state under the principle of one man, one vote, unlike the previous republicans. An example of one of these reforms was to grant a much greater amount of freedom of speech. As a response to them, our popularity has reached more than 80%, which is more than enough to proclaim the Commonwealth. By the will of the people and the final order from Gun II, the Regency Council has been dissolved, our kingdom as well, and a Commonwealth has taken its place. William Tanner has also become the temporary leader, as he is the leader of the Mounties, and since he will ensure to continue reforms and that the Commonwealth is defended. The creation of the Commonwealth has allowed for the coring process of our old lands to begin, at least in the Three Rivers, where resistance is gone and collaboration almost at 100%. It will take a lot of political power, but Porto Prairie and Stonewall have at least started the process. Another change is that our queen is being retired. In the past, she played an important role for the well-being of our kingdom, but after the loss of her husband, that is forever gone. Our reforms can now continue, and they are split in two parts. The first aspect is economical and political, and the second is military. Starting with the first, the rights that were given to the people before the Commonwealth can now be enshrined in its constitution, to never allow a crazy monarch or noble to remove them. The economic changes were then started, who include funding new industries to help to diversify our economy. Construction of infrastructure was also a big part of it, because just like everywhere else it is extremely bad. While the efforts were focused all around our country, a significant part of it was used to connect the Three Rivers and Metis territory with Brandon, because their distance from our capital was one of the reasons the Republicans were able to rise up and almost destroy all of Manitoba. But the most significant economic reform was the introduction of more metals to our standard, who currently only has gold. This is to ensure long-term economic stability and also grant us more money to spend. A win-win for everyone except maybe the banks. The success of all these changes can already be seen, which allows us to turn towards our military. You might wonder why this is necessary. The lands of the former kingdom already lie under our Commonwealth, and our army is strong enough to defend them. But our ambitions are so much bigger than that. We can only rest once all of Canada is united and our Commonwealth and its people are free. And to succeed with this, our military needs to grow stronger, especially as the Enclave and the Brotherhood of Steel, remnants of the same American government that invaded Canada prior to the nuclear war, invade our lands once more. Even before the economic reforms were done, we had actually already started our military reforms. They were focused on our skies, since we've never had an air force, which has hurt us a lot. So we set our most experienced researchers on developing aircrafts worthy of our commonwealth. Once the first few test planes entered production, we established the National Manitobian Air Force to separate the work from the army. After this, the army reforms went by quickly. We expanded our conscription and experience with cyber dogs in our border protection. One last thing before we begin the liberation of the Canadian people was that William Tanner expanded the Mounties. And so we can start. After careful examination of our position, we have decided to attack the Union of the Machines. They have taken over almost all of central western Canada, including the former Great Stampede lands. However, while they might be strong, we have heard numerous rumors that they are currently invading the MacArthur Enclave. So while it pains us to help our enemies, striking down the machines now that they are distracted could be our only hope for a quick victory. During our preparations, they had been able to send a surprising amount of divisions to defend, but it still was far too few. So we declared war without hesitation. After a surprisingly quick invasion, we have probably doubled our landmass, but it could be even more because before we had crossed the river going through Stone City, the machines had forced the Enclave to capitulate. However, once the robots themselves surrendered, the lands didn't fall into our hands, but in the hands of the Sisters of Steel who took over the rest. This is of course totally unacceptable, especially since it's Canadian land which they have stolen. We will immediately prepare for war with them, which will take a lot longer to prepare than for the machines. Not only since most of their forces are elite paladins, but also since their protectorates will join, and the goals from Uranium County will be caught in the middle. So we have started training about 2 more armies of men-at-arms to expand our military to 35,000 deployed men. Regarding our air force, our investments have paid off, with it already being the biggest in the north. However, this does not mean that we will stop expanding it. Instead, we will double down and continue with even more investments. With the discovery of several pre-war schematics, our scientists will be able to produce fighters that haven't been seen in the Canadian skies for centuries. We also have plans to train 10 special operation divisions that will specialize in paradropping our enemies from the skies. During the military preparations, the coring process of our lands have also come a long way. All of 3 rivers has been fully integrated, and the same process has recently started in Metis and Old Believers territory. After quite a while, we were ready for war and demanded the 2 states north of the Saskatchewan River. As expected, they rejected our demands, so we declared war on both them and Uranium County. We don't have any substantial plans on how the war will go down, except our first attack. We will paradrop Whale State with the goal to completely cut off all connections to the 2 Great Stampede states. Before the Sisters got a whiff of our plan, we launched it. Since they didn't have any garrisons, we landed everywhere except on one tile which they had. However, we could help out our paratroopers by crossing the river from the north with our men at arms. As the division defending was sent running away, we started our offensive into the Great Stampede States. Almost immediately they were split in two, with the western being fully encircled but not the eastern, since we had missed one possible river crossing. Still, more than 6 divisions were crushed and the rest were sent out of our lands. After this great success, we started a new attack in the west. The plan was to encircle Calgary, and since they had too few defenses around the city, our Mounties were quick to execute our plan. To clear out the city, however, once encircled was the hardest part, as the Paladin garrisons entrenched themselves in the ruins, but being completely encircled, they didn't stand a chance. Looking at their most western flank, it had been completely demolished, so we sent the rest of our Mounties to the area and gave them the orders to spearhead towards the Saskatchewan River. For a long time of the march, no resistance at all was noticed. It was only when it was too late and we had already reached the river that some forces showed up. After reaching it, we launched our paratroopers for a second time to stop any forces from fleeing over the river. Once again it was a great success, and this time it was an even greater encirclement, with maybe even half of all the remaining forces being destroyed. This means victory is more than secured, at least against the Sisters of Steel, because Uranium County have held out strongly. However, we have a great plan to cripple the Ghouls and continue defeating the Sisters. It took some time to prepare, as we had to construct an airport in Godard, but after that it was launched. In less than a week, our forces reported our operation as a success, as we had managed to encircle Uranium County and almost the whole Sisters' army that was left. Immediately after we received the good news, we started destroying the encircled forces by punching them back from the west. After some days, the first few of our soldiers arrived to Uranium County. As they did, we immediately started attacking from the east to stop the Ghouls from reinforcing the west. While many of the battles were losing, they were enough to break through in some areas, and with our other forces pushing from the other side, the Ghoul capital was soon captured. After a few more cities put under our forces, they surrendered, leaving only the Sisters of Steel and their protectorate left. But with only 4 divisions, this means absolutely nothing. Our forces immediately started marching towards the Cord territory, and naturally with only 4 divisions we met no resistance. The only resistance we met was once we reached their protectorate, who still had some forces left. However, this didn't matter, as our paratroopers now launched their last paradrop against them right on their capital. Since it was completely unexpected, we could capture their leader and force them to surrender. After a complicated peace deal, we decided to draw our border along the upper Missouri River, and everything south of it was turned into vassals, since it isn't Canadian lands. As our territory is now much bigger, Tanner has decided that we should take a pause in our conquest and focus on solidifying the areas we already have. He has already expanded our frontiersmen so that they can better handle our expanded borders. But being the leader of the Mounties, he has also started to further strengthen them, not only by training 8 divisions, but also by improving their clothing. With all Great Stampede lands in our commonwealth, we've also started using one commodity which almost only exists in this region: horses. While we won't be able to equip many of our Mounties with them, 3 is enough to give us a significant edge in any battle. During all our battles, our economy back home has been doing great. And with control over the 3 rivers and the trade that flows downstream, we have decided to grant new contracts to the Hudson Bay Company, who will help us utilize this trade. After a few more months, Tanner decided that it's time to proclaim Canada. We have already taken over so much of it, so there is no need to call us Manitoba anymore. We are now the Commonwealth of Canada. But instead of further expanding our territory westwards towards the Canadian coast, Tanner has instead decided to form the Northern Volunteer Corps. Because in our east doesn't lie any communist robots or American invaders, but the Passkeepers and their Northern Union. 3 states just as dedicated to help the Canadian people as we are. And currently they are defending their lands against the Brotherhood. So we will send volunteers to them, help them defeat the invading Brotherhood, and then they will definitely accept that we join their alliance and begin an integration process into our Commonwealth. We sent over 21 divisions, including 2 groups of 200 of our nuclear power attack and jet fighters. After discussing with our host's high command, we decided that we would stage an offensive from the east, while they would try to break through the main Brotherhood defenses in the north. All the while our air force would rain hellfire from the skies. Immediately as we started our offensive, our air force saw huge successes, almost bombing out all resistance. This allowed us to cross the Columbia River despite our allies previously having a tough time. Once the right bank was secured, our cavalry showed their usefulness for the first time. Being almost 3 times faster than ours and our opponent's infantry, they reached several cities before the news of our breakthrough even had reached the Brotherhood High Command. After reaching the outskirts of Seattle, we focused our offensives elsewhere to allow our air force to bomb out the city before starting to march into it. The new direction we chose was in the south, towards Portland, since we expected much less resistance here. And that was true, since our cavalry managed to encircle a majority of all forces defending the area to then simply march into the city and capture all its suburbs. Instead of returning to Seattle and executing a frontal assault, we used our success in the south to move around their forces, sending one of our cavalry divisions directly to the city while the others moved towards the Mount Olympus to attack from another angle. While there were stronger divisions defending the city, our air force had done such a good job at reducing their organization and entrenchment that all boroughs of the city except Capitol Hill were captured. This last one would fall once our cavalry from Mount Olympus arrived from Vashon Island and destroyed the power armor division defending it. With the fall of the last part of Seattle, the Northwestern Brotherhood collapsed, with their leaders either surrendering or fleeing Washington state altogether. With us single-handedly being the ones who turned this war into the victory it is, our relationship with the Northern Union were on top. Especially after we promised that we would invade the lands of the Broken Coast to liberate their peoples and give the Syrinx nation some of their claims. Thus we were allowed to join the Northern Union, and since we are by far the strongest in the faction, we took over its leadership. Immediately after we took over, we started justifying on the Broken Coast pirates to fulfill our promise. While it took more than 100 days to do it, it at least gave us enough time to prepare. However, it came with one downside. The Kingdom of New Victoria could declare war on them before us, and they had even time to cross over to Tantalus Pain. But it doesn't really matter that much, since we plan to invade them nonetheless. But first, the Broken Coast. As we declared war, we called in all our allies and immediately started by crossing Fraser River by absolutely demolishing their defenses. Even despite reinforcements arriving, we could continue for some time until all the major villages in the area had been captured. Then we shifted to the bigger front, where once again they were absolutely destroyed. Our superior air force simply shredded any resistance. After a few more cities captured, and with the new Victorian army quickly advancing as well, the Broken Coast had been completely broken. While we could have annexed a lot of its lands, since we don't have a border with them, we puppeted 2 nations and gave the Syrinx their promised claims. Of course, New Victoria also got a lot of land, but this land is only temporary. Because about half a month after our victory, we declared war on them. Unfortunately though, since we don't have a navy, we would normally have no way to cross over to their islands to capitulate them. But this is only a problem for everyone else, because we, remember, have paratroopers. So instead of starting by advancing into their territory they had captured from the Broken Coast, we immediately paradropped their islands. Not knowing about our special forces, they only had their ports garrisoned, which allowed us to quickly establish control over several small cities. With enough supplies found in these cities, we had enough strength to capture the ports as well, and soon New Victoria, their capital, fell to our forces. While our plan was to send in our Mounties to deal with the rest of the island, we had found an airport west of Duncan. And this airport allowed our transport planes to quickly take up 3 paratrooper divisions and drop them over the 3 big cities in the northwest of the island. So, with their island now completely under our control and their army on the mainland realizing they would have no chance to win, they all capitulated. Once again, despite being Canadian lands, they were simply puppeted, with us having to wait for the integration of the passkeepers before we can even start about thinking about the integration of them. And since this will probably take years, our conquests are now done. However, there is still some diplomacy to be made before Tanner can retire and elections be held. The most important was that we invited Nathaniel's Watchmen to our Northern Union, not only since we don't seek any war with each other, but also since their leader was once a Manitoba knight who fought against the Republicans, so he and Tanner have a lot in common. Then we started working on establishing formal relations with the new California Republic, who might be the only nation stronger than us. While we at first were scared that they would be hostile to us due to our vassalization of swaths of American lands, they don't seem to mind since they don't have any objectives to reunite the USA. Instead, they simply seek to create a strong California, which we are fully okay with. We might also send delegates to the Provisional Republic of Texas and the Republic of the Rio Grande, both big players in the South, mainly in order to raise our legitimacy as the one true Canadian state, in return for giving them the legitimacy they need. And that was it. While all of Canada isn't united, we've come a long way, and the future generations will surely be able to finish our work. So thanks for watching and see you in the next video.